My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, welcome to the fifth week of Lent. From every Sunday of Lent, we hear something about sin and something about Jesus' approach towards sin and the sinner. Today also, we are presented a passage from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. The heading given here is a woman caught in adultery. The passage goes like this. Well, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, the woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" They said this to test him so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. This is the background. Come, let us study from this passage. What is the new lesson Jesus is trying to teach to us and tell us? Here we can see that a woman is caught in adultery, and the scene is very pathetic, and the person placed before Jesus is only a woman. And the matter they raised before Jesus is that now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. From where did this law come from? It comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22, verses 23 to 24, where we read, "If within the city a man comes upon a maiden who is betrothed and has relations with her, you shall bring them both out to the gate of the city, and there stone them to death. This is the law." And further in the book of Leviticus, chapter 20, verses 10 says, "If a man commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death." This is the law. This law they are quoting before Jesus. But the truth is that they caught the woman who is committing adultery. Adultery cannot be done by one person. It can be done only by two persons. And therefore, they should have brought both of them in front of Jesus to listen to Jesus, how Jesus is judging them, or how Jesus is reacting to the situation given there. But the passage clearly states, they said this to test him, only to test Jesus, so that they could charge Jesus. Therefore, only the act is done. But Jesus, being a righteous person, he does not react so immediately towards them, telling them, "My dear brothers, if you want to take action on this particular woman, according to the law of Moses, where is the man who committed along with this woman adultery?" Jesus would have questioned them. Then and there Jesus would have sent them back, reacted to them. But Jesus did not react. Jesus, it is said, Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them. Now, what Jesus says there is very important. "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Here we see that Jesus is not against the old law. He wants to fulfill the old law. And therefore he allows the persons who brought the woman to Jesus quoting the Old Testament quotation from the book of Deuteronomy and from the book of Leviticus, telling Jesus this act is a heinous act which has to be punished. Jesus also goes in accordance with them, with their understanding. But the condition Jesus places before them, I want to punish her according to you. But before punishing her, I want to make sure who is qualified to throw the first stone. There should be a qualified person. Say for an example, only a qualified doctor can treat a patient. In the same way, a qualified vakil only can fight for the rights of the other persons. In the same way, Jesus is telling, if there is a sinner, if there is an act of sin, that act has to be punished. That sin has to be purged away. But what Jesus wants, you have the right to punish that person. You have the right to throw stone at that particular person. Jesus even did not go to the extent of telling them, go and bring the man who committed along with her the act of adultery. Jesus did not go to that extent. Jesus is ready to accept the law. Jesus is ready to put into action the law that existed. But Jesus goes further from the existing law and adds a beauty to it, and therefore he says to them, let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. A person who is qualified as a sinless person, he has the right to throw stone at the sinner. And when Jesus said this, again Jesus bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. Now, it was not the young generation standing there who might have been good in numbers, because like these occasions in India, when the lynching take place, in India, many of the lynchers are very young persons. And there are certainly some older and elderly persons who instigate the act, who instigate that such a heinous act, thinking that they are sinless people. They are the right citizens of India. They do various heinous crimes, thinking that they are saintly people. To them, Jesus placing a thing rightly to their conscience. It is the right time. And India, many of the people who treat the people of other religions, thinking that they have the only right to live in India. They are the only sinless people. They think that they are the righteous people. They treat the other religions people so badly, lynching them and violating their rights and taking away their properties, destroying them. Even with the bulldozer, they pull down their houses mercilessly, heartlessly, and in a very heinous manner. Even the animals would not try to do that. But in India, we can see that even the politicians instigate such an act against the people who do not belong to a particular religion. To them, this passage is very apt and very applicable to each one of them whoever does such a heinous crime against the people of other faith. To them, Jesus is telling, let the one among you who is without sin be the first one to throw a stone at her. Jesus is challenging them. If you want to punish, want to pull down through bulldozers, many of the houses, just because did we have the different faith, to them, to those hypocrites, to those heartless people, to those who think they are righteous, those who think they are without sin, to them Jesus is placing this statement, let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And we see the starting from the elders, they left the place. Same thing will happen in India. Jesus comes to see these people, what they are doing in India. Certainly Jesus will tell to each one of them, you have to be qualified first to be a sinless person. Then only you can stone, then only you can take action, then only you can punish, then only you can purge away sins. To them, Jesus has placed such a beautiful lesson to them. Here we can see, my dear brothers and sisters, that Jesus has convicted the convincers, or the people, those who accused her, became the accused. Jesus in turn turns towards the woman as a comforter. How he comforted her. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She replied, No one, sir. Then Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Jesus is telling her, Jesus is showing towards her his mercy. Jesus then and there also gives his judgment. How does Jesus judge now? How does Jesus show his mercy? Jesus is telling, neither do I condemn you. I can condemn you because I am sinless. And I have the right to apply the Old Testament law of throwing the stone at you because you were caught in the act of committing adultery. But I am not like the other persons, whoever is living in the world, who has ever lived in the world, and whoever will be living in the world. I am unique. I am different. I treat a person as one person has to be treated, with the humanitarian aspect, with a divine aspect, with mercy, with compassion, with a combination of justice and compassion. According to Jesus, compassion and justice go together. They are in the parallel line. There cannot be justice without compassion, and there cannot be compassion without justice. And therefore, Jesus is doing both together simultaneously in a simple manner, telling to her, neither do I condemn you. This is Jesus' justice. But go and so do not sin anymore. Shows compassion. He is also at the same time, he is ready to show his judgment. Suppose you sin again, if you do the same act, you will be condemned. You will be stoned to death. And therefore, Jesus is exhibiting his justice on one hand, his compassion on the other hand. And therefore, the people who brought her, accusing her, became the accused. And the accused is given a way to become a saint. Now, every saint has undergone this same agony. So every saint has undergone the same purification, just like this woman. I am sure and certain this woman never again might have tried or might have had the courage to do any act that which is sinful. She would have lived a life exactly like Saint Mary Magdalene, who after being touched by Jesus never turned back, never looked towards the life of the world, but she looked towards only at Jesus, choosing the better part, listening to Jesus, living a life full of purification, full of sinlessness, and full of compassion. She might have been one of the Jesus's women disciples who are mentioned in the Gospel of St. Luke chapter 8 verses 1 to 3. My dear brothers and sisters, what does this passage teaches us? This passage teaches us that Jesus confronted the accusers and turned the accusers as the accused. And Jesus comforted the accused and makes her to go and live your life. So life without sin. I'm sure you, after Jesus telling her, neither do I condemn you, go from now on and do not sin anymore. This verse is applicable to each one of us. Come, my dear brothers and sisters. Now is the time. Now is the appointed time that we need to learn from Jesus, who is a compassionate judge, who is not ready to condemn us then and there, but ready to wait and ready to see us a saint. Are we ready to become a saint? Then let us follow the example of Jesus and let us go and sin no more. Amen.